In the ancient world, many cultures told stories about a monster of death that lurks in the deep, dark sea.
I guess I just want to make the case that there are dragons all over the Bible. There be dragons.
How do they be dragons?
All over.
When it comes to the world of the powers of darkness, there are certain things that are just on the table. There is disorder or chaos. Those things are 180 degrees removed from the world God created for the human family that he wanted. Leviathan was a very familiar symbol in the ancient world, not just in Israel and Canaan, but just broadly. This great dragon of the sea as being a metaphor for chaos.
What the biblical authors do, and this is what we'll do in all the episodes to follow, is take up that cultural symbolism that's very common in their day, and they tweak it and develop it and do interesting things with it. And that's where you get the variety of monster creatures.
Writers are using things that are familiar to describe spiritual threats to a human being.
And one day, there's going to be a seed from the woman, a descendant, who's going to crush you on the head while you strike him on the heel.
Welcome to another episode of Ring Them Bells. We believe in the power of the good news and that Jesus has defeated evil and is king of our world. We exist to help you rediscover the supernatural focus of your Bible. We believe that the supernatural focus has been suppressed, and we're here to help bring that back into the light. We do that through incredible content creation. We have mashups and interviews with some of the best scholars featuring N.T. Wright, Tim Mackey of the Bible Project, and Dr. Michael Heiser. All of this content creation supports our nonprofit ministry here at Ring Them Bells, where we provide pop-up feeding centers for the homeless and also specialize in hurricane relief. If you haven't yet, please take a second. It only takes a moment for you, but means so much for this ministry. Subscribe and turn on the alerts, as this is the best way to connect with our channel. Today, we start an epic new series going over a supernatural theme that is traced straight through the entire Bible. Starting at the very beginning in Genesis and tracing all the way through Revelation, we are going to explore the theme of the Chaos Dragon. The Bible wants us to know that we have an ancient supernatural enemy that has been against us from the very beginning. The Bible uses many different metaphors to describe this great evil that seeks to bring humanity into chaos. It's shocking to many that one of the most prevalent ways to describe this enemy within Scripture is the form of a dragon. The theme of the Chaos Dragon is going to take us into the divine council worldview and the supernatural narrative that Jesus put flesh on. Today, in the introduction to this epic Chaos Dragon series, we are going to explore how the Bible describes the cosmic force that is working against all of creation. Our goal is to just give you an introduction into these concepts so that we can explore each one of them more in depth as we move along through this series. As always, when exploring important themes throughout the Bible, it is important to start at the beginning. Buckle up and get ready for an incredible episode and series. Stay tuned, my friends. The beginning is near.
Ancient people believed that chaos was the primeval state of the universe. Much like a big pile of Lego bricks scattered across your living room, the building blocks for creation were in place, but they remained unformed until some deity came along and imposed order. In ancient writings, chaos was often symbolized by the raging sea, and we can find that imagery in the very first verses of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Primordial chaos was often personified in the form of sea monsters. One such monster is the Babylonian goddess Tiamat. In the Babylonian version of creation, Tiamat fights with the god Marduk. After a detailed battle, Marduk kills Tiamat and cuts her body in two. He then uses the divided pieces to form the heavens and the earth. Something very similar happens in Genesis. And God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. These waters are apparently the deep mentioned in Genesis 1:2. The Hebrew word translated deep is tehom, which some scholars argue is closely akin to Babylonian Tiamat. This isn't the only place foreign sea monsters show up in the Bible in a creation context. Psalm 74 describes God creating the world, but in the middle of the description we find this: "You divided the sea by your might. You broke the heads of the sea monsters on the waters. You crushed the heads of Leviathan. You gave him as food for the creatures of the wilderness. Yours is the day, yours also the night. You have established the heavenly lights and the sun." This passage has God destroying sea monsters by dividing the chaotic waters. In this case, scholars know the imagery comes from the literature of ancient Ugarit, where the god Baal battles Yam, who is portrayed as a chaotic, churning sea, and a terrifying sea dragon named Tanun or Litanu. These terms are equivalent to the Hebrew words in the psalm. "You divided the sea, Yam, by your might. You broke the heads of the sea monsters, Taninim, on the waters. You crushed the heads of Leviathan, Leuyatan." A lot of this vocabulary and language and the way supernatural rebellion is just described generally, and broadly speaking chaos metaphors, a lot of it is traceable and derivative from Babylon. Babylon was a bad place because this is where the earthly attempt to kickstart Eden, this is where it died. Babylon was the one who conquered Judah, took the last two tribes, and specifically the Davidic tribe, to whom that the promise of kingship was given, and destroyed it all, destroyed the temple, took the people back to Babylon. And this is the period when many scholars, both secular and believing scholars, believe that a lot of work was done to put the Old Testament into final form. And what they do is they seed a lot of the content with Babylonish imagery to communicate where we are now is not where we're supposed to be. We are on the enemy's turf. This is the place of chaos. It's being turned into something it was never meant to be, and that God doesn't want it to be.
Okay, so now we've got our Chaos Dragon introduction. Next, let's turn to Tim Mackey and the Bible Project podcast to flesh out the Bible's use of dragon symbolism to describe this ancient supernatural evil, an evil that has been against us from the very beginning. We'll find out that the Hebrew scriptures interchangeably use both words, snake and dragon, to describe this very present ancient evil. All of this will lead us to Jesus so that we can celebrate the victory we have over the Chaos Dragon.
So let's just quick, in this opening conversation, I guess I just want to make the case that there are dragons all over the Bible. There be dragons.
They be dragons.
All over. And the first ones that you meet, and certainly that ancient readers of the Bible would see right there, and did see right there, is on day 5 of the first story in the Bible about the 7 days of creation. Day 5 has an explicit mention of the great sea monsters. Remember, on the 6 days of creation, first 3, God separates light from dark, separates the waters above from the waters below, and then day 3 summons the dry land out of the waters. Days 4, 5, and 6 come along, and in the same order, God fills each of those realms with inhabitants. the lights above that separate light from dark. And then on day 5, the waters above and the waters below. The waters above are the sky dome, so he sets the birds in the air. Mm-hmm. They fly against the face of the waters above. And then in the waters below, what we're told in Genesis 1, verse 21, is God created the taninim and every living thing with which the water swarms and moves about in according to their kinds, and all the winged birds according to their kinds, and God saw that it was good. So the big question is in Genesis chapter 1, verse 21, what are the taninim?
Tananim?
Tanin is the singular.
Tanin.
And then this is the plural, taninim.
Okay, he put an eem on it.
Yep, taninim. But tanin is the singular.
Okay.
Yeah. So just quick survey, New International Version translates taninim as the great creatures of the sea. So great creatures of the sea, the New International Version, opens the category that's just what it could be talking about. English Standard Version, same words, different phrase, great sea creatures.
Yeah.
The Old King James just straight up went for whales, just great whales. That's how it translated, taninim. However, the New American Standard and the New Revised Standard Version both translate the great sea monsters.
Okay, now call it a monster. I'm not thinking about a whale anymore.
So the question is, should we go with whales, King James? Should we go with sea monsters? Or should we go with sea creatures? So let's just do a quick little survey of the use of this word tanin.
Tanin.
In the rest of the Hebrew Bible.
Okay.
What we find are 2 psalms that explicitly recall day 5. Psalms 104 and Psalms 148 are explicitly structured and reference the 7-day creation narrative. And when they get to the creatures of the sea, in Psalm 104, verse 24, how many are your works, O Yahweh? You've made all of them in wisdom. The earth is full of your creatures, the great and wide sea.
It is a big sea. Yeah. It's pretty large.
Yeah. Where animals move without number. Living things, small and great. There the ships sail. Verse 26, Leviathan is there that you formed, and then it's the Hebrew word litzachek, to play.
You formed to play.
You formed to play.
Created the Leviathan to play.
To play, yeah.
That's not how I would describe a monster.
Well, remember, on day 5, God made the taninim and all the other stuff, and God saw that it was good.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not bad. It's good. Leviathan. It's like...
and Leviathan, what is that word?
Exactly. Okay. We're building out the vocabulary.
Okay.
So instead of taninim, Psalm 104, so let's just tuck it away. Leviathan.
What Hebrew word, what's the word here?
Livyatan. So our English word Leviathan is just spelling in English letters, the Hebrew word, Livyatan.
Okay.
Psalm 148, verse 7, when it recalls day 5, it just uses the word tananim, and that's in the deeps of the abyss.
Okay.
So what's fascinating is, in the Second Temple period, Israel returns from exile in Babylon around in the late 500s BC. And then Ezra and Nehemiah rebuild the temple that lasts all the way up till 70 AD, after Jesus. It's called the Second Temple period. And a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible was produced by Jewish scholars.
Because Greek has become the lingua franca.
Yep. And to make the Hebrew Bible available to Greek-speaking Israelites, a Greek translation was produced. And at both of these places, if you look up both these Psalms in the old Greek translation, Psalm 104, 148, both the Hebrew words tananim and Leviathan are translated with the Greek word drakon, from which we get our English word dragon. So ancient Jewish readers found dragons right here in the Psalms and in Genesis.
Yeah.
Drakon. Yeah.
The Greek translation of both of these words
is drakon.
And in the Greek language, a dragon was merely a sea creature, or
no, it conjures up all the
everything.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean in Greek myth and lore, you've got the Titans and all the famous dragon slaying stories. If you look at the ancient Aramaic commentaries and translations of the Hebrew Bible, also produced in the Second Temple period and later. They're called the Targums.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the Targum of Genesis, chapter 1, on day 5, what you find, so for example, there's a Targum called Targum Neophiti. It's an Aramaic translation, but very, almost like a form of commentary. Very expansive.
Okay. It's not a strict translation.
No, not, yep. So on day 5, they identified the monsters plural. Targum Neophiti says, and the Lord created the 2 great monsters, Leviathan and Behemoth.
Oh,
And these are the 2
and Job.
monsters from the speeches of Job.
Mm.
Yeah. So there's other Second Temple Jewish texts, Second Baruch, First Enoch, that also mention God making Behemoth and Leviathan on day 5.
Mm.
So the point is that the ancient Jewish readers saw actual monsters on day 5 of Genesis.
Yeah.
1. That's my point.
Got it.
And Greek readers saw drakon, dragons.
But they were good monsters.
But they're not bad.
What's that?
When it comes to the world of the powers of darkness, there are certain things that are just on the table. There's death. Death is a big one. There is disorder or chaos. Those things are 180 degrees removed from the world God created for the human family that he wanted at the very beginning. They are anti-Eden. Now things accrue to that. There will be agents of death. There will be agents of disorder, these supernatural beings. Their activity is going to get described through either vocabulary or symbol or metaphor. Leviathan was a very familiar symbol in the ancient world, not just in Israel and Canaan, but just broadly. This great dragon of the sea as being a metaphor for chaos. The dragon lives in the sea. The sea is a place that was feared. Why? Because you can't live in it. If you try to go live in the water, you're going to die. Okay? It's threatening. It's unpredictable. It can be calm one minute, and the next minute, it's going to take your life. The things that live in it are foreign to you because you live on the land. You're used to seeing the creatures there. But when you're out on a boat for a long period of time, you're going to see things that you've never seen before, and you don't really know how to process them. And the writers are using things that are familiar, unfavorably, okay, to describe spiritual threats to a human being. Again, it's a very simple strategy, and when you really think about it, it's very effective.
Okay. So now we've got 2 words. We've got tanin, which is used 14 times in the Hebrew Bible.
Okay.
We've looked at a couple. Leviathan, or Leviathan, it's used 5 times in the Hebrew Bible. But then we've also got one more word that gets connected with tanin and Leviathan, and that is the word nachash.
Snake.
Which gets translated, it's the word for the thing that Adam and Eve made in the garden. So I'm just going to, here's a whole bunch of passages. I'm just going to mention them because we're going to dive into these deeper in future conversations. Psalm 74. It's a poem that's recalling when God created the cosmos. Verse 12, Psalm 74. Yet God is my king from of old, who works deeds of salvation in the middle of the earth. You divided the sea by your strength.
So that's day
2.
Day 2.
Mm-hmm.
Dividing the sea. Yeah.
You broke the heads of the Taninim in the waters. You crushed the heads of Leviathan. You gave him as food for the creatures of the wilderness. Oh.
I thought he created him to play.
Oh, okay. Yep. Yeah. So we'll sort all this out.
All right.
But the point is...
I feel like we're just throwing puzzle pieces all over the table.
Yeah, that's the point of this conversation.
Okay, great. Wonderful.
Notice how Taninim is in parallelism with Leviathan in the sea, and it's a creature with many heads that God crushes.
Wow. The heads, yeah.
To split them. The heads. So it's a multi-headed sea monster.
Yeah, this is a true monster.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Isaiah 27, verse 1. In that day, which is a future day, this is rad text. We'll talk about this later. Yahweh is going to punish Leviathan, the fleeing Nachash.
Okay. Leviathan is described as a Nachash.
Mm-hmm. With his fierce and mighty sword, he's going to punish him. Indeed, Leviathan, the twisting Nachash, he will kill the Tanin who lives in the sea.
Okay. He just throws them all there together.
Yeah. Yep. So Amos 9, verse 3. Ooh, this is good. So Yahweh's so angry at his covenant partners Israel for worshiping other gods, neglecting the poor, allowing injustice and oppression, that he says, I'm going to hunt you down. In this poem, I'm going to hunt you down.
Wow.
And so Amos 9, verse 3, even if they hide on the summit of Mount Carmel, I'm going to search them out and take them out there. If they conceal themselves from my eyes on the floor of the sea, from there I'll command the Nachash, and it will go bite them. Yeah. So these are all examples where our three words are all mixing and mashing together here.
Yeah. There be dragons.
Yeah, there be dragons.
In these tales, the dragon and the sea it lives in represent the chaos that threatens to drag creation back into nothingness.
The ancient authors of the Bible not only knew about these symbols, they also used them in stories and poems all over the Bible.
Really? Dragons in the Bible?
Yes. On the first page of the Bible, God brings order by separating the dry land from the chaotic sea, and there he contains the sea dragon. And this monster is connected to that dragon-like snake that confronts Adam and Eve in the garden. A spiritual being using the power of chaos and death to lure humans into their own self-destruction.
Again, it's not that we shouldn't translate Nakash as serpent. That's evil. That's a sin. Mike says don't do that. Okay, that isn't the point. The point is that the term Nakash is actually a pretty layered term. It conveys more than one idea. Okay, profound statement number 4. Okay, any given word in any given language is capable of conveying more than one idea. Okay, Nakash is like any other one. As a noun, hanakash in Hebrew, can mean serpent. Just fine, works well, no problem. It could also be hanakash, just the consonants, could also be the one who dispenses divine knowledge, the one who practices divination, something like that. And certainly that happens in the story, doesn't it? Okay. If it's an adjective with a definite article, then you could translate it as the shining one. And luminescent vocabulary for divine beings is ubiquitous throughout the Bible. It is a stock vocabulary thing. So that wouldn't be unusual either, especially if you think Isaiah 14 is drawing on the same story of divine rebellion against the Most High God, because there you get Hallel ben Shakar, the shining one, the son of the dawn. Over in Ezekiel 28, we have the mysterious figure who the Masoretic text refers to as the cherub. There is no Adam in the Masoretic text version, it's just the cherub. He is adorned with precious gems and jewels. And they shine. What an odd coincidence. My suggestion is that the ancient person would have read the passage and had all of these things floating around in their head. Because, again, they know the terminology, they know the language, they know the possibilities. They use all these terms in different ways. They're not reading it with only one thing in mind. And, let's be honest, besides that point, they know, Israelites are smart enough to know that snakes don't normally talk. Okay, and so this is a very common way in ancient Near Eastern literature. When you wanted to depict a divine being meeting a human being, having a conversation or whatever, it's very common to cast the divine being as an animal. Egypt does this a lot. Story of the shipwrecked sailor, again, the god is a giant snake there. I mean, this is common stuff. So if you're a literate Israelite, and you've read some other of your neighbors' literary stuff, these stories about their gods and their religion, this is going to be really normative to you. Oh, I know who. She's not really talking to a member of the animal kingdom. She's talking to a divine being disguised as one. I mean, it's just the simplest thing in the world to them. So why we as Christians, again, this is something I've had difficulty wrapping my own mind around, why there's resistance to Mike saying things like, this wasn't just an ordinary run-of-the-mill member of the animal kingdom. And maybe when we talk about Hanakash, we can talk about the alternatives. Why that all of a sudden is like, oh, that's just ridiculous. That's horrible. Oh, I don't listen to this guy. Okay. Hey, the New Testament tells you who this was. Okay. It doesn't, it tells you that this is the Satan, this is the devil. I mean, it uses other terms, not just serpent or snake. So what's the problem?
So this makes us look with new eyes at the Nachash of Genesis 3 that we meet. Now, that's a land creature.
And so when you say Genesis 3, you mean the story of Adam and Eve in the garden.
Yeah.
Who all of a sudden this character shows up, and it's a Nachash.
Yeah, a Nachash.
Which is translated snake, but it's talking.
That's totally right. Yeah. Yes. Yep. Yeah, exactly right. It's talking. And for an ancient reader whose mind has all these connections already, the only thing you would know to link it back to, well, I think there's a couple things you would know to link it back to. And we'll go into this, and we have done in previous podcast series, like in the Firstborn series, we did a long meditation on the relationship of the humans and the sky rulers, human land rulers, sky rulers, and then the snake. Here, the Nachash, the last thing in Genesis, in the 2 chapters that come before that you would associate with Nachash, are the Tananim of day 5 of Genesis.
But like you said, this one is not a sea creature.
Correct.
It's on the land.
It's on the land. Yep. But I'm just saying, in terms of word association, Nachash, Tanin, Leviathan, these are all ways of referring to the same type of creature. A monster of the deep. Well, it's good on day 5. But what this Nachash is going to start doing is some not good stuff.
So if I was an ancient who, like, these words were all melded together, like what passage was that in? Amos? Where it's like all 3 of them, they were all synonyms.
Oh, Isaiah chapter 27, where the Leviathan, the fleeing Nachash, the Tanin in the sea. Yeah.
So if those words are all a bundle, and I'm reading Genesis 3, and a Nachash comes, in my mind, I almost imagine this like
a dragon,
this sea dragon that's like slithered out of the ocean onto the land.
Yeah,
it's still kind of dripping and scaly and fierce, and it's like, hey. So what did God say?
Yeah, exactly. Like a beast coming up out of the sea.
A beast coming up out of the sea.
It sounds a lot like Daniel and the Revelation.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Oh my goodness. It's like these authors have a coherent way of thinking. It's just different than us. Yeah.
All right.
Also interesting, when the Nachash does its thing and God curses the Nachash, what God says is, because you've done this, cursed are you more than all the cattle, more than every beast of the field. On your belly you will go.
Yeah.
And eat dust all the days of your life.
So I feel like what I've been taught is the snake was a lizard that turned into a snake. Lost its legs, now it's a slither.
Yeah, so I think it's evocative in many ways, because Isaiah is going to meet snakes that are throne room courtiers of God in the divine throne room. In Isaiah chapter 6, you can have a vision. In the book of Isaiah, the Old Testament, Isaiah chapter 6, Isaiah wakes up in a dream, where he's going to be commissioned to be a prophet to Israel. And
you're talking about the seraphim?
He sees what he calls seraphim with wings surrounding the divine throne. And the word seraph is the word snake.
That's another word for snake.
Yes, venomous snake.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's the word burn for talking about how the venom feels
when they bite you.
In the Torah and the Numbers scroll and other places, the word seraph means snake.
Okay.
So snake with wings, which were a very common way to imagine creatures in divine throne rooms in the ancient world. Egyptians drew them all the time.
Okay.
Snakes with wings. So here's going to be a challenge we have as we have these conversations, is symbolic imaginations merge visual symbols with their meanings, which means that different looking visual pictures can evoke the same exact idea.
Okay.
And so there's going to be biblical passages, and we're going to look at other ancient texts that use similar images, and to create an actual literal picture in our minds of like, wait, I thought that one had feet, but that one had wings. That one had multiple heads. That one just has one head. And we're trying to do something that is working against the grain of how the symbols work.
Mm-hmm.
So the most important thing about these symbols is the ideas, what they represent. And the visual images in each individual context will differ.
So you're saying whether it's a creature in the sea, whether it's a creature that's crawled on the land, whether it's a winged one in the sky, they all have a central meaning?
They all have a set of connected meanings.
Uh-huh.
And the reason why the visual descriptions differ from passage to passage or text to text is usually based on the kind of unique context of each, what's happening in each one.
Okay.
So, for example, the Nachash in the garden it's a land creature.
Okay.
Clearly, it's a land creature. Because what we're going to see is that scorpions become an associated creature, and also lions. Which for us, we're like, that's a different species altogether. But in the Psalms, lions and snakes are two ways of talking about the same type of chaos creature. So the Nachash of Genesis 3 definitely fits in the same kind of slot as the Tananim of Genesis chapter 1.
We need your help. Ring Them Bells is a non-profit organization where every dollar donated goes right back into the mission of spreading the good news and helping those in need. The main ministry of Ring Them Bells is serving those in need in the name of our King Jesus. Over the past year, we have fed over 2,000 meals, and next year, we want to double that. We can't do this without your support. Everything we create here and all of the food that we serve is free because it's paid for by generous viewers just like you. If you feel led to donate and join the mission with us here at Ring Them Bells, click the Give Butter link in the notes and comments of this video. If you can't support us financially, please continue to like and share the content, as this helps us so much with spreading the good news about what Jesus has done for our world.
If you go back and you look at the first rebellion, Genesis 3, again, the figure that will eventually become known as Satan. The word Satan in Hebrew is not in Genesis 3. The serpent is never actually called Satan in the Hebrew Bible, in the whole Old Testament. This is how it works in the Old Testament. The first rebel gets cast down to the Eretz. That's a Hebrew term for ground or land. It's also a term that can be used of the underworld. Why? Because in Israelite cosmology, the underworld was actually inside the earth. This is the realm that was associated with death. Why? Because you bury people when they die. And the being who's in charge of this, or who's the cause of all this, is this figure from Genesis 3 who has been cast down to this place. Instead of being like the Most High or above the stars of God, no, now you're going to be like beneath the feet of mortals, the ones that you sought to lead astray and destroy. So we get the kernel thoughts that actually are systematized in the New Testament.
As we can now tell, the Bible weaves a complex web of imagery when describing the forces of supernatural evil. We've also dialed in to see that this imagery is used to describe specific supernatural beings and not just some mystical chaos force. Understanding the interwoven serpent imagery of the chaos dragon lets us know that we have an enemy that all of humanity needs to be rescued from. Enter Jesus. In this last section of our introduction, we are going to explore how the victory that we have in Jesus connects us to the defeat of this chaos dragon. Make sure to subscribe and turn on your alerts so that you can stay tuned for more episodes, as we have so much more exciting content to share with you in this Chaos Dragon series. Let's close together as we see Jesus defeat the Chaos Dragon.
Biblical authors also use dragon imagery to describe violent human kings, like Pharaoh, who enslaved and murdered the ancient Israelites.
Even the famous Goliath, the details of his armor and weapons depict him as a scaly, snaky giant.
So the sea dragon is loose in all these forms, but it can be defeated.
Yes, but be careful, because the power of the dragon is strangely appealing. A dragon slayer can be enticed to use the dragon's power.
And so become a dragon themselves.
Right. In fact, entire empires can become like dragons. During Israel's exile in Babylon, the prophet Daniel has a dream about 4 monstrous beasts rising up out of the sea.
Whoa, mutant dragons?
They represent violent kingdoms in league with dark spiritual powers. But then, a new character appears, rising up from the land to sit beside God's throne. And as the dream ends, Daniel sees those monsters destroyed.
So who is this dragon slayer?
Well, Daniel calls him one like a son of man.
The Son of Man. That's what Jesus calls himself.
Okay. So if we're just looking for the repetition of monster reptilian type of imagery, then you won't meet it very often in the New Testament, except just a handful of places. So it's a good example where when you get to the New Testament, these themes are so developed and connected, and then in Second Temple Jewish literature explored, that when you get to the New Testament, you don't actually need to talk about dragons all the time to be talking about dragons. So for example, when Jesus goes out in the wilderness to be tested by the Satan,
The adversary.
or the Diabolos, you're supposed to call to your mind the Nachash of Genesis 3.
He's out in the wilderness. There's a creature out there.
Yeah, and he's tested in relationship to food, like Adam and Eve, and in relationship to power and rule and authority, which is...
That's all the themes of Adam and Eve.
Yeah, except it's in the wilderness and it's, the Satan, the adversary. However, in Luke chapter 10, when Jesus sends out a group of 70 disciples to go in pairs, and he goes out and he says like, hey, announce the kingdom of God, heal the sick, invite the poor into your tables, and then come back and tell me how it went. So in Luke chapter 10, verse 17, it says, the 70 returned with joy, saying, Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name. So even like dark spiritual forces will like leave people alone when we just say your name. And Jesus said to them, yeah, I was watching the Satan fall from heaven like lightning. It's like when the kingdom of God advances, the elevated status of the adversary is brought down to the land. So interesting. And then he says, look, I've given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy. Snakes and scorpions, you can stomp on them. Yeah. We didn't read this in Genesis 3. That begins to sound like what God said to the Nachash in Genesis 3, which was you're going to go on your belly.
You read that.
And one day there's going to be a seed from the woman, a descendant, who's going to crush you on the head while you strike him on the heel. So you're going to get stepped on by a human while also, getting a strike in on that human. And it seems like Jesus is alluding to that, saying like, hey, listen, I did some snake stomping out in the wilderness, and I sent you out in my name, and so you have my authority to start putting some pressure on that snake's head. But he joins snakes and scorpions.
And he blends that with demons.
Yes, that's exactly right.
So
Spiritual powers, yes.
I haven't been thinking in those terms. I've been thinking about God. When I think of all the creatures that God created, I don't think of spiritual beings. So a sea monster, I'm not thinking like it.
You should.
I should be?
Yeah. So we'll have to form that category in our next conversation.
All right.
But Jesus takes it for granted that spiritual beings in rebellion against God can be referred to with the imagery of snakes and scorpions.
Yeah.
Yep. And so this helps us make sense of why at the conclusion of Paul's letter to the Romans, he'll say, Romans 16, verse 20, the God of peace will soon crush the Satan under y'all's feet. The grace of God be with you. So he's got Genesis 3:15 on the brain, but in the place of the seed of the woman crushing the head of the Nachash,
it's the people following Jesus.
the people following Jesus who crush the Satan
Oh, wow.
under their feet. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there be dragons.
There be dragons.
Oh, that was my main point.
Yeah. Yes. Loud and clear. Dragons in the Bible. I have many questions.
Good.
Chaos imagery is even present in the Gospels. When Jesus walked on the stormy waters of the Sea of Galilee, he was showing his power over the forces of chaos. So what in the world is going on here? God didn't really fight literal sea monsters at the beginning of creation. The Bible's authors are purposely taking competing religious views and turning them around. The writers want everyone to know that Yahweh, the God of Israel, defeated chaos, not Marduk, or Baal, or any other deity. Yahweh is the one who sets order to the universe and holds chaos at bay. Ultimately, it is Yahweh who will create a new world without chaos. Look how Revelation describes eternity. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. This verse is not depicting a world without large bodies of water. The message is that chaos and all that opposes God will be defeated once and for all.
Yes, in fact, the gospel authors depict Jesus confronting the dragon in many ways, like when he tramples over the stormy sea, or when he resists the tempter in the wilderness, or when he overcomes death and sickness in others. And even when the power of the dragon does its best to entice Jesus,
Jesus doesn't give in.
Jesus resists the dragon in a surprising way. He surrenders his life and willingly enters the belly of the beast.
Wait, the dragon slayer is slain by the dragon?
Well, that's how it seemed. But Jesus trusted in God's power to create new life on the other side of chaos and death. And he called his followers to confront the dragon in the same way.
Which means...
resist the temptation to use the violent, destructive ways of the dragon. And also, don't be afraid of it. Jesus' victory over the beast has created a way to escape its power. And trust in the power of God, who will one day defeat the dragon once and for all.
Jesus. It is our participation in finding ourselves within this story that frees us from these dark powers. That victory is offered to you right here in this moment. The only cost is allegiance to the one true King Jesus. We do this with the proclamation of his rule and authority over all nations and all powers in this world. You can do this with us and join this growing community here at Ring Them Bells. We are a global collective of redeemed individuals who pledge our allegiance to Jesus and Jesus alone. We invite you into this community. We would love for you to subscribe, like, share, join this community, follow along with us as we follow the one true King. So turn on your alerts and stay tuned. As always, the beginning is near.